Hello everybody, this is Jasmina, and in this video I am going to be talking about analyzing mountains using largely the human plate. Now this topic that I'm covering here started with the investigation of 5 elements yin-yang mountain breakthrough formation, which is what Patrick Chu's book states is a mitigation that can be used to uh, sort of mitigate a death spirit Sha when it's not a good thing for you. Because the death spirit Sha, even though it has a horrible name, can actually be positive. And this comes from book 2 of his Auxiliary Star series. And although I didn't find anything that talked about actually mitigating this, it is another way to look at whatever mountains you have around your visible ones, that is, that you have around your residence. It could be for any building, but most people use it for their residence. And this can tell you the energies that go beyond what you might have from other things like flying stars and all that stuff. Now, when this 5 elements, blah, 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 is translated into Chinese, which doesn't, which it takes a little bit of work to try to get something to come out for the breakthrough in the formation. The other 5 characters are really easy to know. But if you just directly translate breakthrough and formation, it doesn't work very well. But after getting some help from my husband, whose first language is Chinese, I was able to find some stuff. Not anything with this name though, but it's related to what is often called run pan, which is this pan is the same as the low pan, so it's the plate. So this is the human plate. That's exactly what this is. This is the human plate, and then this is sand, literally sand, and this is it's like a dial or made like a compass, I guess. So this is the general term, but others say it is also the same as sand removal, which is a little bit unclear in the documentation, but that's fine. But this one has to do with you're not actually removing a mountain, but the sand actually means mountain. Uh, the sand removal method is used best before deciding on an orientation for a grave or a residence. And what you do here is you are placing the facing and sitting directions, since they're always opposite one another, in a way that the mountains that you can see are auspicious mountains. And I will talk about this in a separate video because it is worth a separate video. But here I'm going to talk about analyzing what you already have in your current situation. Now, there are some general schools with varying methods, and one of is Li Gong. This is an actual person's name. Renpan. I don't know how to really pronounce this properly, but it translates to middle needle. And then this is again the sand dial. And it is the one that's discussed the most, and it is also related to earth entering eye techniques. And I'm not 100% sure if this is just another name for the thing, but I believe it is. That these two things are the same thing, just different people name them something else. And so we'll see. I will keep looking at this, but I think they're basically the same. Now, none of the sites that I've looked at, not a single one, and I've looked at over a half dozen, maybe a dozen different sites in Chinese, of course. You can't find anything in English. And we have, they never talk about mitigating an unfavorable element that is created when you have the death spirit Sha auxiliary star. But using the ideas there, I think I understand how to use it, but I can't guarantee I'm right. Now, mountains in feng shui, and I want to remind everybody of this, that also includes hills and just even higher ground. And there are times when you can't tell you have higher ground near you, but you almost always do, unless you're living on the top of a hill that is the highest hill in the entire visual distance that you can see. And that is kind of rare. Just don't live on the top of the hill and you're fine. And so, these hills and higher ground are included if there's a capital M, unless it's at the beginning. But if there's a capital M in the middle of the sentence, it also includes the hills and higher ground. I'm trying to be very careful with this. Now, it is always preferable to have a sitting mountain. That is a mountain in your residence's sitting subsector. And this is using the earth plate. It tends to make your life more stable. It gives you a backing, basically. Now, there are methods that use a combination of the earth plate and the human plate, but not all of them do. Some just use the human plate only. Li Gong's human plate middle needle method does use the earth plate to determine the element associated with that sitting mountain. And so that is kind of unique. Now, another method uses the human plate to determine the element that's associated with a sitting mountain, and that's basically the sand removal method. And then there was one single website that talked about how to analyze a place that does not have a sitting mountain. Now, I only found a single website that does that, and I'm not sure that it's 100% legitimate, because usually when I can find something, I find several websites that talk about this. I just haven't found anyone but that single one. But I will show it to you just so you get at least some idea of how to use it. And this one will use the human plate to determine the element associated with it. And it really is a lot like the sand removal method. So it may just be an offshoot of that. Although I think the sand removal method makes an assumption that you actually have a sitting mountain. But that isn't completely clear. But then if you're not, then maybe you're using this one instead, and it would give you the same answer. Now, regardless of which method you use, the element that you're associated, whichever one you use, it's going to become your host element. And that is either your sitting mountain or your sitting direction of your residence. Now, this method basically requires at least one visible mountain, hill, or higher ground that's located in a sector that's not your residence's sitting subsector. So we're not talking 45 degrees, we're talking 15. Now again, one method uses the sitting, for the sitting mountain uses the earth plate, and two use the human plate. But all other mountains, anywhere else but your sitting mountain, definitely use the human plate. And that's why I've emphasized the human plate here. Now the human plate is simply rotated 7.5 degrees counterclockwise from the earth plate. Now the earth plate is the one that almost everybody knows who's ever done any kind of feng shui. It is the most common plate that you will see, and most people are quite familiar with it. Now, in both plates, each subsector has an associated element, and most of the subsectors, there is two elements between the two plates that don't match each other completely. And you'll see what I mean there. When you shift it, not only are you not using the same elements for the same sector or subsector within the two plates, they also are rotated. So it makes it quite complicated. Now, the relationship between the host element and the guest mountains element determines if the mountain is auspicious or inauspicious for your residence or for whatever building it is. Now, there is a lot of similarity in this relationship as there is when you analyze chi flow within a residence. It's basically the same rules. So here you have a host element, which is either going to come from the earth plate or the human plate. And then you have the guest mountains element, which will always come from the human plate. And so you can have any one of the 5 elements on each one of these. The ones that are in pink are the positive ones, and the ones that are in yellow are show caution. Now the worst one is the CI. Now in Batsa, this would represent influence, but here it actually indicates some rather significant problems. The PO is output, it's producing out, and this is, it drains your energy. So if you're not healthy and young and strong, the PO can be a problem, but it can also help with some creativity because that's what producing out does. It's your output, it's your creativity. So of all of them, I would say that the CI, that is control in, is the worst one. The CO is wealth. This represents if you have a mountain, let's say you have wood and you have a mountain in the earth sector, then this represents a good career. When you work from home, you do as good a job, if not better, at home than you do at work. And so that helps you with your career. The PI is resources, it's produce in. It's what is resources in Batsa. And this helps you learn more and also problem solve. And the SE is the same element and it's the friend. So this helps you with relationships. So this is what all this does. And mountains in each one of these sectors, depending on where your host element is, will give you different energies. And I think this energy is beyond anything that has to do with your flying stars or anything. This is energy that affects your house because of the way the mountains are arranged and the way your house sits on that piece of land. Now, if you have a mountain range of 75 degrees or more, and you will see why in a little bit, you will have all of the interactions. And most of the time you get a net positive because we have 3 positive and 2 negative for each one of these. But depending on the size and how far it goes, you can have more negative or more positive. So it's a little tricky. Now, a mountain's influence can also be determined by, of course, investigating the sitting star in that mountain sector, and this is using the earth plate. As the presence of a mountain activates the sitting star. So this is another way to look at it. If your residence has an activated combo 10, pearl string, parent string, or 7-star robbery formation, that will make the all stars timely. So that means that any mountain is a positive influence on that star. That is, whatever that star is, it will come out in the positive way. Right now, star 7 usually is considered to be quite untimely. It represents when it's bad, it represents theft or being conned or getting scammed. But when it's in a positive thing, when it turns timely, it helps you with communication and helps you express yourself better. And so that's what it will do if you have one of these activated forms. And this affects the entire house, so it doesn't matter. There are 2 other forms that only affect the facing and sitting directions or sectors of your residence, but then you have to be there to get the positive things, and they make those sectors very positive. Now, the flying star chart indicates your opportunities that come from outside. that does help you find better jobs, find the right people to help you when you need help. That's what this represents. This method, using this, tells you how supported your sitting energy is, that basically, and it will tell you basically how much stability that you have. And this stability, this is like inner emotional, mental stability. This will help you deal with changes that happen in your life without it like really making your world turn upside down. Now, this is quite important in period 9 because period 9 is a period where we do tend to have a lot of change. So this is going to be something that you need to be really cognizant of. And if you can do something where you can have a mountain that gives you good energy, this will help you be able to deal with the changes that we all will experience in period 9. Now, if you think you have a sitting mountain, which is preferable, stand outside your residence in line basically with the center of your residence. That's usually the center of the back wall. If it's a rectangular or square house, it'll be the center of your back wall. And you basically have your back against the wall so that you know you are parallel. Your back is parallel to the wall and you're looking straight forward. Don't turn your head to either side, straight forward. That is your sitting direction. That's what you're looking in. And you can note the compass reading. And this does help if you actually have two people, somebody writing this down, and maybe a calculator. You want to add 7.5 degrees to that measurement, and you just basically turn your body until it reads at 7.5 degrees. And did you see a mountain in there? Anywhere in there? Any higher ground? Doesn't matter, doesn't have to be what you call a mountain, but any higher ground. And then you go back to perpendicular to the wall and subtract the 7.5 degrees and then turn your body until you're facing that 7.5 degrees. Did you see a mountain there in that scan? If you did, you have a mountain in your sitting direction, obviously. And we are talking about the subsector. This is why it's together they make 15 degrees. So it's a pretty narrow thing unless you have true mountains that are fairly far away, so that you can get a much broader, the farther away it is, the wider the span is. Now, this is the 15-degree wedge centered on the sitting direction of your residence. It doesn't matter if your residence is near the edge of an earth plate or in the middle of the earth plate direction. It doesn't matter. We're not looking at the earth plate. We're just looking, do you have a mountain in that 15-degree wedge? We don't care the specifics of exactly what it is. We just want to see if you have a mountain there. Now, any higher ground, again, in that 15-degree wedge counts as a sitting mountain. And of course, the higher it is, the stronger it is. And we're talking visually higher, not necessarily physically higher, but if it looks tall, if you can see it over the other houses, it's tall. And of course, if houses block your view of a mountain you know is there, it doesn't count. You don't have the mountain because you can't see it. You have to be able to see it. Now, this 15-degree wedge usually will not line up with either plate, with the earth plate or the human plate, unless your house is in a null or void direction. And that's where standard feng shui doesn't work. But I think this one could, because this is using a different type of energy. It doesn't, but I haven't seen any guarantees of this, but they haven't warned about being in a null and void direction. So right now I'm assuming that it works regardless of that. Of course, I would not recommend living in a house that is in a null or void direction, simply because you can't take advantage of what is probably a lot of good stuff inside your house. Now, in general, you're going to look at the highest peak within that 15-degree wedge. But there, if you can see more than one peak there, then you have to make a decision which one to use. Now, for when you are actually doing this, you are going to have to correct for the errors that your compass, like on your phone, because it's just a magnetic compass, it's extremely likely to have some problems, and you will have to be able to find the precise location of the peak. Now, so that you can know where that strongest energy is. And so, if you have a mountain that straddles two human plates or two earth plates, you have to know where that peak is, because that's going to be what you count as that element associated with that particular subsector where the peak is. Now, if you have a flat top mountain like a mesa, you use the center of that flat area, and that will tell you where, which subsector that your mountain is really in. And I will show you examples. I think this will make sense as we go on. Now, if you have a range of mountains, the highest peak in that range is the strongest energy. But if you can see any higher ground in any one of the sectors, doesn't have to be the highest one, that is still going to give you some energy. And of course, if the peak is half as high as the highest peak, then the energy is half as much. I mean, it makes a lot of sense. Now, for a single mountain, that peak of the mountain is the strongest energy. But again, if it happens to span two plates, two of the subsectors, then you receive additional energy, usually at a lower level, because the peak is usually just in one of the sectors, the subsectors, regardless of which plate you're using. And but you still get that energy because there is still mountain in that second area. Now, to be able to do this properly, you really need to know the facing direction of all your walls to do this. And if you find your facing direction and you have a floor plan, you can do it. Now, I do have a video entitled 3 Ways to Measure Your Facing Direction, and it may not be out for a little while until after this video is out, because I've got 3 videos I need to record about this, so it could take a little while. But I've already covered these methods before. So you will have, except for one, which is using a site plan, and I think I may have covered that too. So it's kind of a rehash, putting everything together. But you can still find this information on my YouTube channel already. Now, the most accurate place to take the measurement is on your roof, positioned over the center of your residence. Not the center of the roof necessarily, but it's immediately over the center of your residence. So it depends on if you've got a covered patio and it goes the whole length of your house. If you're in the center of the roof, you're not in the center of the house, because the patio, if it's not enclosed, is not part of the house. So it makes it a little harder to do, but I don't recommend you get on your roof. It's not a very safe activity unless you're a roofer and you do this regularly. Actually, getting on your roof is easy. Getting off your roof is hard, and it's very scary. I've been on our roof before, even onto the second floor, but that's because I could get onto the first floor, then onto the second floor. Getting down from the second floor to the first floor was really scary too, because I could barely reach that difference. So, and then getting down from that first floor, no fun. Unless you're really comfortable with heights, and you actually use some safety equipment so that in case you slip, you don't fall off the roof, I don't recommend this. Now, if you have a roofer who was willing to do this for you, you may have to pay him, and maybe you should. You can do that. You can have them do it, but they have to understand what to do. And so this is the most accurate, but it's not safe. So I don't recommend it. The next best thing is to measure outside your residence on the ground with your back to the center of your residence. And that will work pretty well for all but the closest mountains. And you can actually take measurements from each side of the wall where you see that mountain. And this helps you confirm you're getting the right measurements. And the farther away the mountain is, the easier it is to measure. So here's the earth plate that everybody knows. But here are the elements that are associated with it. It is quite easy to figure these out. Basically, if you look at the main chi for the branches and the element of the stem, that will denote the element. So the tiger and the rabbit have wood as their main chi, and this is yang wood, this is yin wood. These are all wood. These are all fire, these are all metal, and these are all water. That's very straightforward. The dragon, the goat, the dog, and the ox, their main chi is earth, so they're earth. The only ones that are left are those four ordinal directions, that is southeast 2, southwest 2, northwest 2, and northeast 2. Sorry, northeast 2. And they will take on the whatever the energy is or whatever the element is that has the big majority, that is counterclockwise, that is 2 steps back. What is it? Here, 2 steps back, 2 steps back, and 2 steps back. So that's how it's done. Very straightforward. This is one of the best websites that I've found for this, and yeah, you have to read it on a sideways. But yes, the number is nasty, but I'll try to remember to put this in the comments below. It is a Chinese language website and does not translate very well. I had to get help from my husband to understand what was being said. So if you don't have a source to do that, it's going to be hard to understand. Now this is the human plate. Now most people remember in the earth plate that we have in the middle of the rat, that's where 0 is. Here's 0 degrees, it's between the rat and the yin water. So, and the elements are all different. And it has nothing to do with what the main chi is or anything. So but it has a very distinctive pattern. If we start at 0 degrees, this is earth, metal, wood, water, 2 fires. Earth, metal, wood, water, 2 fires, and so forth. So it's very, very simply arranged. I don't know exactly why it's arranged this way, but I'm just taking it at face value. And again, it's the same website that talks about both of these. So this is the 2 rings together. This shows you exactly how different they can be, and how it depends on which element or which ring you are going to use, what your host element will be. Now again, all the guest mountains, that is anything that's not in your sitting sector is a guest mountain. All of those always use this outer ring, the human ring. The question is, are we using the inner ring here for the sitting mountain, or are we using the outer one? And it seems to depend on exactly which method you're using. Now, only residents that back to Bing fire will they have the same element. So if you're using the earth plate to determine your host, well, you're either going to be in the Bing or the horse in the human plate, so you'll still be fire. If you're using the human plate, and you would say, okay, maybe I need to use the earth plate for something else, you're going to have the snake or the Bing fire, and so you'll still be in the fire element. It doesn't matter. This is the only one that's consistent. Everything else depends on which half you are in, which element you will have. Now, and it varies a lot. It's this is kind of rather colorful though. Now, this is what the translations say, and I am sort of some of this makes sense, some of it doesn't, and I'm still kind of adjusting and I'm trying to understand exactly what's going on. But if you have a sitting mountain, that is a mountain in that 15 degrees sector, you find both the earth ring and the human ring, and it depends on which method you're using, which one of those, the earth ring or human ring element, you're going to use. Now again, if it's sitting to Bing fire, it doesn't matter which one, but everything else, it'll make a difference. If you're missing a sitting mountain, and again, I only found one website that talks about this, and I'm not sure that they're just not trying to extend things and it's not standard, because I couldn't find another website. It says to use the human ring in your sitting direction to find the element of the host. Now this is exactly how you would treat it if you are doing the sand removal. So that may be the reason why, and I'm thinking this might be the right way to do it, but I'm not certain. But certainly if you're planning on building a house, you would be using the human ring. If you already have a house, I'm not 100% certain about that. Now, this is what makes more sense to me. Doesn't mean I'm right, it just makes more sense. If you have a sitting mountain, I think you should use the human plate to find your host element. I have no problem with using the human plate with your sitting direction, and I'll give you real reasons why I believe this. Now, all other mountains use the human plate. Why should we be using the earth plate for the sitting mountain? It's still just a mountain. And if you wanted to use the sand removal method and you had the money, let's say you love the house, you love the location, and you wanted to use the sand removal method to make the mountains better, you would be actually using the human plate to be able to position, well, to move your house facing to, well, the sitting direction. They're both related, of course, to the right direction. And you would use the human plate. Now, the sand removal technique uses the human plate, and it should not change, when you've actually built the house. This is why I think it should just, all the mountains should use the human plate. But I can be wrong. Unfortunately, there is no really good explanation of why the Li Gong's decided, then his method decided to use the earth plate for just the sitting mountain. I mean, it is the sitting direction of the house, yes, but it is a mountain. It's outside the house, so it makes more sense to me to use the human plate. Now, mountains, again, outside of that 15-degree sitting wedge become guest mountains. Even if they're right next to it, it is a guest mountain, and they use the human plate to determine which element they are. Absolutely everybody agrees on this. There is no question about this. So you do need to understand the human plate, and you will be using it. Now, again, the relationship between the host element and any guest mountains that are there determines if a particular mountain is auspicious or inauspicious for you. Now, you don't count the host mountain itself as a separate mountain and you do a guest because it's serving a different purpose. It just doesn't make sense to count it twice. Now, if the it is the desirable thing is that the host is either SE, that same element, PI, produce in, or CO, control out, which is wealth in Batza, with the guest mountains. That is, the guest mountains had this relationship with the host. Now, blocking inauspicious mountains can be done by vegetation, and I'm usually meaning evergreen vegetation so that you can't see the mountain anytime, whether winter or summer. Now, there is an exception to this. Any mountain that activates a special formation in your residence should never be blocked by vegetation, even if the elemental relationship is inauspicious. Because this, if you block that, your outside opportunities go way down. And then you tend not to be able to make progress in your career or make more money, and you never get out of the house. It's better to leave that mountain there, work hard outside, work hard on your career. You can earn more money and you can move to a better house. That's the way to deal with it. Don't block anything that activates a special formation, regardless of what element it is. So here's that relationship again. Pink is positive, it's auspicious, and the yellow is inauspicious. So here's an example. Now, this is actually the way the new house that we're building is set up. And we have lots of mountains both behind us and in front of us, and we have a couple more here. There are mountains here in the north, but they are blocked by buildings and by a fence, so we don't count those. And there is generally some very minor, super minor, higher ground somewhere over here. And very far away, there are also mountains over here. But again, I can't see them because they're blocked by buildings. Since we actually have true mountains around us, this higher ground is very weak and you can ignore it, honestly, because it's so weak. I mean, we're talking the slope of the land is like 1%. You can't even see it. It looks dead flat when you look at it. And but I know it isn't because I have looked at the topographic map and it has a very, very, very low slope. But and so if I didn't have mountains, visible mountains, and they're very visible, then I would have to use that higher ground. So its facing direction is it's 84.15 actually, because I've used the survey and the floor plans and the site plan to know exactly how the house is sitting. I don't need to be that precise, so I've just rounded it up here. Well, it's rounded down actually, but then the sitting is just 180 degrees from there. That's it. I mean, once you know you're facing, you know you're sitting, and you actually know both sides, both the like this side and this side, because the house is rectangular. We know exactly what directions they are. Now, I've just extended this so you could see exactly where it is, because it's a little hard to see otherwise. But this is this is 260 and this is 270, so there's 264. And we have mountains all over here. So I know we have this. In the human sector, it is definitely fire, and it's definitely the rooster. But even in the earth plate, it is still rooster, but it's metal. And so now we just, we have to kind of look at this. Which one do you want to use? Let's first use the human, human ring, because if this house hadn't already had its foundation done, we could use the sand removal method, and that uses the human plate. So that's what I'm going to start with. And I'm thinking that it probably should use the human plate because it's just another mountain. Now again, I do have two other mountains. I don't know if I said that, but in these two sectors. They are not very tall, but they're very close, relatively speaking, so we can see them. Now, here Uh, if we use the human plate for the host, that is fire. So this is the rules for the fire. And so what we have is a bunch of stuff. Because and this is the thing, when you have a mountain range, you're going to have everything. Any decent sized mountain range has more than one of these sectors, these 15-degree sectors. So if we add everything up, we have 5 inauspicious mountains, and they are the Earth mountains. This one, this one, this one, that's 3. And then we also have water. We have one here, and we have one here. Now, the mountain doesn't go to the pig subsector. I know this is covering it, but it doesn't go that far. You can go back and check if you like to. So I have 5 inauspicious mountains, and then I have 7 auspicious, and that's the rest of them. That's the wood. There's a bit of wood here. There's a bit of wood here. I'm counting it as 1. There is the fire. We have 1, 2, 3. So we don't count this one because it's the sitting, but we have 3 other fires. And then we also have the metal here and here. So we have 7 auspicious mountains. Overall, it's auspicious. And so that's nice. Although that means that we can become tired. This also means we may have a calamity or two. So it would be a good idea to block the view with a tree in this sector so that we don't see this part of the mountain and this one too. And that is doable, actually quite doable. Now, I haven't actually checked exactly where the mountains are, because nobody in the family has, at least the immediate family, has a device that can do a compass, like on the phone, without having Wi-Fi. And this house isn't finished, so it doesn't have Wi-Fi. And so I can't use that. But I can use other things to actually find directions. And I will talk about that. And this will help you as you go on. But you have to be able to identify the mountain, usually by name, so that you can Google it and find out where its peak is. So that you can actually find a bearing from your house to that peak without having to use a compass, if you can find the name of the peak. And that's the key. Now, in the other one, one of the mountains, the earth was not good for the other one, but the metal was, and so they canceled each other out. Here, they're both positive, because here, if we're using the earth plate for the host, then that's metal. And so we have the wood, the earth, and the metal being good, and so that gives all of this good, and this, and these two together are basically enough to be another wood. So it's all, all pretty good. Again, we have 5 inauspicious, 7 auspicious. So in this case, it makes no difference. And if we are blocking mountains, we're still, it will depend on which mountains we block. Now, this house has the ability to have a 7-star robbery. This fire is inauspicious, and it's quite inauspicious, but it is also necessary for the 7-star robbery to exist. So we would never block this. We could block this guy for the fire, and we could block this for the water, and this one for the water again, but we would never block this area here, because we need it for the 7-star robbery to be active. So, and that 7-star robbery is one of the most powerful ones. So we would never block it. And this is a case where you have to know this. Now, it is best to measure to the peak of a mountain, including the mountain in your 15-degree wedge, the sitting wedge. And sometimes the mountain is not fully within a 15-degree wedge. You want to see the highest point that you can and see if that's in the 15-degree wedge. It might be at the very edge of one side. Wherever the highest point is on there, that will become the actual location. And that is, it'll have a degree to it. And that will make a difference when you are if you are using the earth plate or the human plate for the location of the host. So, so this you really have to know that to a pretty precise degree. Now, if you have several peaks, and that usually occurs, I mean, even that 15-degree wedge, you can have several peaks, especially if the mountains are a bit farther away. You pick the one closest to the center of your subsector, unless there's another peak that is like more than twice as high as that more central peak. I mean, that central peak, most of that mountain will, I mean, especially if you have more than one peak, that mountain will be in the 15-degree wedge fully, whereas the other one is not likely to be because the 15-degree wedge is not that big. So, you know, the closest is usually the best. The closest to the center of that 15-degree, that is truly you're sitting, your back is against your wall and you're pointed in the, you know, you're looking straight ahead. And that gives you your true sitting direction. Not necessarily from your cell phone, but that's the true sitting direction in reality. Now, you do need to find the true direction to the peak, and it can be done on your phone's compass while knowing your residence's facing directions and therefore the sitting directions and a tiny bit of math. But if you can identify the peak that you're looking at by name, you can usually find its latitude and longitude, and you know your house's latitude and longitude. And you can do that with Google. And so with the peak identified, you can be certain which element is the correct element on either plate, because it makes a big difference if it's on, you know, which half of the human plate and which half of the earth plate. It makes a difference what the other one will be. So you do have to understand exactly where your peak is. So in this case, it's again the same house. This is the 15-degree sector. And this is not any realistic, I'm just putting mountain range, as this is my symbol for mountain range. There is a peak that's actually quite close to the center, somewhere in here, and there's another peak that's quite close to one edge. But they're basically the same height. So it's the one closest to the center that becomes the important one. Now, if you can identify the mountain peak by name, you can see in your 15-degree wedge, you can Google the name and find its latitude and longitude, and you can pinpoint the center of your residence on Google. I mean, you have to understand where the center of your living part of your residence actually is. You're only going to see the roof, but you're going to figure that out. Then you can use this website, very useful website, I hope it never goes away, that can help you find the distance, which is really not needed here, but the key is the bearing. Now, I'm going to show you what it looks like. The first thing you put in is the latitude and longitude of your residences. You're putting in two different latitudes and longitudes, you know. One's for your house. The second one will be for the mountain peaks, latitude and longitude. And it will tell you the true direction from your residence to that peak. Super, super easy if you can figure out which peak you're looking at. So now I just put in some fake numbers just to give you an example. This is where the house would be located, and this is where the mountain is located. And so you put them in digital format. It's best to do that, and that's what Google Maps will give you. It will give you the digital format, so it's a lot easier. Make sure it just says coordinates. This is how it works. And it will tell you exactly how far away it is, and it does it in kilometers. You can change it to miles if you like, and it tells you the exact degree. So now it becomes 1,000 times easier. And you can do this for every single peak you can see if you can name it and find its latitude and longitude. And sometime in a mountain range, especially one that's not like perpendicular to you, it's sometimes hard to know what you're actually looking at, especially if you're kind of off on an angle. It's not really clear which peak you're looking at. It can be very confusing. I've been fiddling with this, and it's, again, quite confusing. Now, this is a screenshot from that website. And it shows you a little thing here, tells you exactly where a true compass, if you had one, which honestly doesn't exist now, this would be what it is. And that's simply by the latitude and longitude. It has very strict rules. So this is basically where it's located. So it is still going to be in the rooster, or in both cases, it's going to be in the rooster, and it'll be either fire or metal. So I know I have this right, and that's good. Now, with declination and a lot of electromagnetic interference that we have around the residence today, you can't trust a compass reading. And I will actually show you how bad it can be. Now, I'm not 100% certain. I'm using my tablet. I've dropped it a few times. Maybe I've really screwed up the compass. Maybe something is just really off. But it does relative readings okay. It just, the number is so incredibly far off, it's hard to believe. I don't really have access to, I don't have a smartphone, so and my husband doesn't have a compass app on his phone either because he doesn't need it. But anyway, this is, you will see how bad it can be. But I have those 3 methods to help you find your true north. You can then find your true facing, and with a floor plan, you know where the facing of all your walls, even if they're not at 90 degrees, you can still know they're facing. And you can, with that, use your compass phone reading to do this. But like I said, if you can identify the peak and you can identify your house, it's easier to use that app, the website I just talked about. Now, you want to use the peak. That's where the energy is the strongest. And that's especially true for mountains not sitting in that sitting 15-degree wedge, because you're looking for anything there. When you're doing it for all the other mountains, you simply look at the peak. And of course, if you have a mountain range, you'll have several peaks. You look at each one of the peaks. The highest peak is the strongest. Everything else is a bit weaker, but you just find out what you have. Now again, it's the relative difference between the compass reading, the one that you take perpendicular to your wall, and the one you take pointing at the mountain while you stand at the same spot. That will allow you to know your actual direction of that mountain from your residence if this is the method you want to use. Now, the farther away the mountain is, the less likely there will be an error just by, by pointing it. And they tend to give you very consistent readings, and they should. The closer the mountain is, the more likely you are to have different readings. Now, taking 2 measurements, one from a corner that you can see the mountain, and the second one from the opposite corner, the other side of that one wall where you can see the mountain, you can average those 2, and if you take a 3rd measurement in the middle of that same wall, that helps you confirm the direction. Now, in reality, you should be in line with that mountain and the center of your house. That would be the real one, but that's very hard to do. You can guesstimate it, but if the mountain is decently far away, you can use this method. In fact, even if it's somewhat close, you can still use this method. So here's an actual photograph from the back side of my house. It is not the sitting direction. In the sitting direction, all I see is buildings. So I don't have any mountains. And so I'm not in the case where I would be using one of the rules for the sitting. Now, I chose this as the highest peak, although these are all quite similar. I mean, all these peaks here definitely give me energy. This one's going to give me a lot less. And there's, a few little peaks. That's a lot less. And actually, there is a mountain dragon here, of course, but it goes along the ridge of the mountains. This is one of its legs. And it's actually not too far from facing our house. But it's really far away. I think this is like 30 miles away, at least 20. Maybe it's a little less to this ridge, but it's still quite far away. But these mountains are really tall. They're like 8,000 feet higher than the valley where the house is located. But I've chosen this one. First off, I can identify what kind of peak it is, and I think it's the tallest. This is a greedy wolf mountain. It is associated with wealth. Not that it seemed to work here, but for us, but it. Now this is actually from my balcony in the back of the house. I can see this mountain on the ground on this side of the house. The house is, kind of at an angle here. So from this corner, I can see this. But when I'm on the other side, all these trees block the view of, I can't tell where the peak is. I know there's a mountain behind it because it doesn't look like sky, but I can't define where the peak is. So this is why I went to the upstairs, and there isn't a lot of difference. There's only 12 feet, I guess, between the two measurements I took, but that's as best as I could do. When we first moved into the house, these trees were not here. I could see the peak then, but I can't now, and I never bothered to take the measurements back then. Now, this is what I get for perpendicular to the house. My back is against the wall. This is the reading I get on the west side of the balcony. This is what I get on the east side. Sorry, it's a little blurry. I was holding the tablet in one hand and a camera in another because I don't have a smartphone. So it's a little blurry, but it's easy enough to read. Now, I know what my actual direction is because I've checked it with the satellite. I mean, I know what direction my house faces, therefore I know what direction my sitting is because the house is basically rectangular. This is an error of over 90 degrees. That's insane. I mean, I know I have something like 10 degrees of declination in my area, but that doesn't explain this. This is obviously electromagnetic things going on. I don't know why it's so bad. Like I said, I've dropped my tablet more than a few times. I might have screwed up the compass, or who knows? I have no idea why. I did use a couple different apps. I checked. Some of them did a little better than this. This one is free, that's why I use it. But it is not it's obviously not giving me the real numbers. But since I know what my sitting direction is, I can tell you exactly what direction that mountain is in. And so if I use the sitting side or the east side of my balcony, actually, when I turn to face the mountain, this is what I read. And of course, it's on an angle because it's no fun trying to hold one and take a photo with another hand. But its actual direction is 84 degrees. So the mountain is in the rabbit sector, in the human plate. And since this is not in my sitting sector, I have to use the human plate. Now, the way you do this is you take the compass reading when you're pointed at the mountain, subtract the compass reading with your back parallel to the wall, and you're going to add if that number is positive or subtract if it's negative, that number from the wall's facing. So this case, this is the data we have. Step one, you subtract the mountain, you subtract the wall facing from the mountain. facing, and here we get 56 degrees. And then since it's positive, we add it to the facing direction of, well, the sitting direction, that direction, and we get 84. That's how I get this number. Again, if you can identify the by name, and I'm not sure which peak this is because there's a lot of peaks in this mountain range, so I couldn't identify it by name. And then of course, if this step 2, let's say this was a negative 56 instead, then this would have turned out to be a negative number. If it goes negative, you add 360 degrees. That'll be the mountain direction. So that's just the way the compass works. So when I go to so this is how I got it. This is why I got this. So just reminding you what I have. Now here's from the west side. These are the two numbers. I get 83 degrees. Now 1 degree, that is acceptable for just looking at a mountain. 1 degree is really hard to do it. But you keep your phone or whatever perpendicular to your body, and you look right at the mountain and make sure everything is all in line. That's the best way to do it. And again, it's still in the rabbit subsector. Now, this, if I average the two together, the 94 and the 93, I get 83 and a half. That's good enough. So this is basically what I have at the house I currently live in. I have mountains here. That's the one we were looking at. And then I have some mountains in the closest to my facing direction. And so here there is no sitting mountain. So we're going to use the sitting direction of the house, which is in the human plate. It is metal. So we have the wood, the earth, and the metal being good. So the earth and the metal here is good. The earth here is good. There's a little influence from the metal, but it's quite weak because the mountains, that part of the mountains, are a lot lower. But fire is the worst one to have. It is it's like the one that will give you the most problems. We have a fire here and we have a fire here. Now these mountains here are actually quite low. This one is one of the higher ones. So this one is very, very strong. Now this is the one that has that a greedy wolf-shaped mountain, which usually represents wealth, and it's in a bad sector. It's an inauspicious sector. And I would say that, this one be one of the reasons why, we don't have, a lot of money. I mean, we're never became wealthy, and we will never become wealthy unless one of us somehow wins the lottery, and then we still have to be very careful. But that's because we don't have any wood, which would help instead. Now we do have, the earth and the metal. Our relationship is good. We're good at problem solving, but we were good at problem solving all along. I mean, we both have very high levels of the direct resources. So this is in our nature, in our Batsa. We're just good at problem solving from the start. So, all this goes together, of course. But, this may explain why, no, we didn't become rich in this particular house. But we're still pretty happy because we have a good relationship and we're not poor. We're somewhere in the middle class, a little closer to the bottom than the top, but actually quite a bit closer to the bottom. But, we're fine. At least we hope we're fine because now, I've only got a couple more years before I will retire, and I don't think I'll be keeping this business for terribly long because it's a lot of work, and I want to have some fun. So I think we'll be okay. At least I hope we will be. But the new house we're moving to is a lot better. But I show you anyway, just in case. Now, anyway, most of the times if you have a mountain range, or several mountains, you have a combination of auspicious and inauspicious mountains. And again, you're looking at the locations of the peaks that make up a range. That's how you define its energy. And the higher the peak is, the higher the energy. Now, if you have more auspicious mountains than inauspicious mountains, it's overall auspicious. Generally, you can ignore the inauspicious ones if you want. If you can do it, you can also plant a evergreen tree to block your inauspicious mountains and keep your auspicious ones. So, but I mean, you can see in the case of what I just showed you, well, first off, the yard is not very big. I can't grow a tree tall enough to block the bad mountains because I mean, it's hard to, I mean, the yard isn't big enough to hold a tree that's going to be that tall. That's the problem. Now, again, you can block the inauspicious mountains with vegetation. It should be evergreen, so if you can, but sometimes you can't. But you don't do it if they're activating a special formation in your residence, and the mountains that I showed you are not doing that. So we have a base sitting combo 10 in the house, and that only needs rectangular walls to be good, and that's what we have. Now, also, if the mountain activates a timely star in your residence, you also don't want to block it. And of course, if you have, like we have, everything becomes timely because we have well, at least the sitting star becomes timely. Actually, everything becomes timely. So we don't want to block the mountains, definitely. So now again, for flat top mountains like mesas, you use the center of the flat area to locate the mountain because it probably spans quite a bit of area. And it may span beyond 15 degrees, depending on how close it is to you. You just use the center then of wherever that is from the one side of the mountain edge to the other side. Now, I'm going to cover the sand removal technique in a separate video. And this is really designed to use before a grave or a house direction is determined. And this helps you find the best way to sit or face your house. So, because they're related to one another, and to give you the best energy from the mountains that you can actually see. Now, when it comes to using this to mitigate the death spirit Sha, being an unfavorable element, that's when it becomes a problem. If it's a favorable element, the death spirit Sha is actually helpful to you. What I think you need to do, and I'm not guaranteeing I'm right, but I think you should position yourself when you're working. I don't think it's a big deal when you're sleeping or cooking. It's when you're working with your back to a human plate direction, because you're human, that makes any visible mountains have an auspicious element, or at least the majority having auspicious elements. And if you can see that mountain through a window and you can position yourself properly, it's even better. But that is not necessary. But you can tell how you should sit. It's actually a lot like the sand removal technique. That's basically what we're doing here. But you don't have to move your house. You're moving your body. So let's say you have a guest mountain, a mountain someplace outside your house, not in your sitting sector, of fire. And so now you say, okay, what directions can I sit? Because you are, and it's the direction you are backing to because you become like the mountain. At least that's my understanding. And, what direction should you sit in to get the energy? Well, you can be in the water, the earth, or the fire. It actually depends on what your need is, which one is the best one. If you're working on your regular job, just doing work at home, I would use this one, the control out. This is your wealth. So this helps you do your job well, earn more money, fantastic. If you're trying to learn something new or trying to do problem solving that isn't normally part of your work, well, some jobs this is the work, like a research scientist, this is all they do. Uh, you would probably still want to use this one. If you need to problem solve for work, instead of using this, you can use this. And if you're learning something new, whether it is for a hobby that you want to become a side gig or for your job, you want to use the produce in. This will help you learn better and faster. And it will help you problem solve, usually in a more creative way. If it's a relationship problem at work and you're having trouble with your boss or your coworkers, you might want to consider this. This can even help with relationships within the family, especially if what you're doing when you're in this position, this is will help you find the right information to help solve your problems with your relationship. And it will also maybe change your viewpoint or change your basically what you're willing to do to help the relationship. And you may realize what you are doing that is a problem in the relationship. So this is a really good thing. Now this is the direction you back to. So you're going to face the other direction, the one opposite of this. So basically, let's use the one we want to back to the water direction because that is for the wealth. And so you have all four of these choices. You can use any one of them, but there is a smart way to do this. When you're working, it's best to face one of your good directions. So this line here is your back. This is your face pointed where the arrow is pointed. So you are going to either face southeast and sit to northwest, or you're going to sit to the northeast and face southwest, so forth. Now, if you are an East Group person, this is where you should be. I'm not in your house, but where you should be in terms of direction. You should face the northeast, sit to the southeast, and sit to the northwest, because southeast is a good direction for the East Group. The West Group can choose any one of these, wherever it's most comfortable. Doesn't matter. You just pick one because you've got all the three choices. You shouldn't do this one though, because this is better for the East Group people. So let's do another example, just so this is clear. If you have a guest mountain in the water subsector, then you want to back to either the wood, the earth, or the water. And so again, this is basically what your choices would be, and I had to kind of make these a little bit weird because they're a little hard to do on these bizarre angles. But in this case, the West Group only has one choice, to be between 90 degrees and 105. So they're backing to that one of that range. The East Group can be in any one of these. So it depends on where your mountain is. Now, if you have both mountains, you could use either one. It depends on you know what you want to get done. And again, this is still for the wealth. So we're talking about working from home, basically. Now, this is my best estimate of what the 5 elements yin-yang mountain breakthrough formation is. But I could easily be wrong. But at least it makes sense with this whole idea and also with the sand removal technique. So I think this is right, but I would not bet on it. Of course, I don't bet normally, so that doesn't mean a whole lot. So now you are going to have some higher ground somewhere in your vicinity unless your residence is on the highest point within your visual range. Don't live in a house like that. This is so simple because there's a lot of other houses to choose from. Now, if if you think you're living on a flat area and you can't see a hill or a mountain, uh, you can look at topographic maps. That usually is helpful. But when you're when you are walking, you can usually tell if you're going up or downhill, unless it's really, really flat. But the topo maps will help you with this. But at any rate, if it's only higher ground and it's not much higher, you aren't going to get a whole lot of energy from it anyway. So you can ignore it, basically. It doesn't do enough for you to make it worth worrying about. So this is for people who can actually see hills or mountains, and that's little m mountains, what we normally call mountains in English. That is an issue. Now, if a mountain is very close to your residence, you're going to see a much bigger difference in the direction of the mountain when you're standing in the opposite corners of your residence. And I saved this for last because this is kind of an unusual thing, but in case this applies to you, you know what to do. So here's an actual place. I'm not sure where this is. I had looked around and I took a screenshot and I can't find it again. But this is an expensive house. The person living here is quite wealthy, I'm sure. They have a huge, probably 20, maybe 40 acres of land. The houses are very, very far apart. And they have a little outcrop here. Now this actually, it's a little easier to see um, in a more zoomed out thing. There's actually a circle around this thing. So this obviously at one point was a small, very small volcano because the ground slopes up all the way around this quite equally. But now it is just this ridge here. And it doesn't seem to be as round, but that's not too unusual. This is where the lava basically came to, or the magma. And the rest of the hill has washed away because this was probably ash, and this is the hard stuff. Now, I can tell just by looking at the shadows that this is sometime in the morning because UTM North is straight up, and there's not a huge difference between UTM North and True North in this case, simply because the whole area is close to the center of the UTM grid. But so this is east, and so the shadows are going this way. So it's in the morning, and it's not noon, and it is, and you can also tell by the shadows here. And so whatever still gets hit by the sun is a high point because you're at an angle. If it was right overhead, it would be harder to see. But this is probably 10-ish in the morning is my guess. But I can see there is 3 possible peaks here. This one right there is the highest. This is the second highest, and the one in between is lower. So what we still have to see is any of this in the 15 degree. And it is, I'll tell you right now, but which of these peaks is in the 15 degree? So this is a little zoomed in. What you would do is you should actually, you will know if you have a site plan, you will actually be able to tell exactly what direction everything is within UTM. So this is UTM, it's perfectly good. You would actually draw a real square. There's some parallax here. That is, this side and this side are not quite parallel. I'm sure in reality they are, but that's because the lens is seeing this kind of, on the satellite, is seeing it at a bit of an angle. It gets quite complicated to do this, but at least we can find that basically just drawing these outline, do a square, and do an X. That's the center of the house. And there is more house around here as far as I can tell, but it doesn't appear to be living space, so I'm omitting it. But this would, and this is a flat roof. This is actually possible if you're not too scared getting down from a roof. This is a pretty safe roof to be on, as long as it's structurally sound, that is. But so the red line indicates from the center that 15 degree. Now you can tell exactly, basically, this is a pretty symmetrical house. In the center of this, if you stand there, the green line is a little bit different, but it is the 15 degree from there. It is narrower because it's closer to the mountain. So this is where you see the farther away the mountain is, the broader your range of looking at things. So if we look at it really closely, both of these peaks could be there, but this one is outside. So this becomes the peak we're looking at to take a measurement to. And I think I've never been here. Again, I don't even know where this is anymore. You would have to be able to see that peak, and I think that you can simply just by looking at this. So if you were to do measurements, now I'm doing this in the computer, and this is like a detailed thing. This isn't what you would measure with a cell phone. After you do all the corrections, you know what direction the house is sitting at to a pretty solid number. I just rounded these to 2-digit or to 1 digit after the thing, which is about as good as I think any of the compasses out there can do. The direction that you would see on the compass corrected for all the error from the declination and the electromagnetic interference would be this. This is that final number you would get. Now, let's say, but you still have to correct for UTM to true north, and so this is the ultimate number. Now, if you average the two, you get this. This is basically, if you round this up because it's 5, this is the same number. That's quite normal. However, if you were to measure it, if you could get on the roof and be at the right spot, then you get a slightly different one. But to a single degree, it is the same. So now West 2 runs from this. Now this is the Earth. This is the Earth one. So this would be, but anyway, you know where this is. So it is definitely in the sitting direction. This house faces East 2, sits West 2. There's no doubt of it. The exact direction is a little iffy, but that's what we have. Now, this is close enough. If I were to look at this on the satellite, I would want to see the site plans to make sure I know exactly where it is, because this number is really close. I would want to make sure whether I have a West 1 facing or sitting house, that is an East 1 sitting house or facing house, or an East 2. This is so close. I would want to see the floor plans and the site plan before I would analyze this place, because it's so close. And the West 1 and the West 2 have different flying star charts and everything. So this is why I'd be worried about it. If it was between West 2 and West 3, they have the same flying star chart. It's not such a big deal. But this one is so close, I would really want to see all the data so that I could make sure I'm getting it right. And of course, I would actually go out here and really take a look and use my tablet or maybe their cell phone to do their, because I'm sure they have data if they live in a house like this. So now here, the mountain peak, it defines a subsector, and we're going to use the Huma Plate. Well, we could use both, but for the Huma Plate, it is a fire element. For the Earth Plate, it is a metal element. So then, of course, I haven't looked at any of the mountains around it. There's tons of mountains around it, I know that. So it depends on which plate you want to use, which one you will, what will be positive and negative. But again, this guy definitely has big mountain ranges it can see. So the they have a lot of energy they can choose from. They don't appear to have blocked anything. I mean, in that zoomed out thing, everything looks like it's a small natural desert plant. So nothing is terribly tall there, and nothing is terribly dense there either. Even when it's a tree, you usually can see that there's a mountain behind it. It doesn't really block the view, not completely anyway. It does reduce it though. So that's it, and I know this was a really long one. If you've made it to this point, congratulations. You deserve a little star, a little gold star like you got back in kindergarten. So thank you again for watching. I really hope this helps you understand how is another way to look at mountains. And the next one coming up will be the sand removal method. Thanks again.